Okay, so we are prepping this live stream and about to go live here. Oh, she's right on time. Okay, welcome. I am Sandra Santa Buckles. Almost forgot my name for a second. Sandra Santa Buckles with Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. Thank you for joining us on our monthly Lunch and Learn. Today with us is Teresa Lancaster, our Executive Director, Kurt Wolfgang, and Jean Werner. We are joining you today to talk about child sex abuse cases. The law in Maryland has changed and it's super exciting and it's taken a long time. So thank you guys for joining us, and we're going to hop right in with introductions. I'm going to start with Kurt and then go to Teresa, and it's kind of like a little bit backwards, but I'll start with Kurt because his will be super quick, and then Teresa and Jean, let her get settled in, and then we'll hop into our questions. Kurt?
Good afternoon. It's Kurt Wolfgang. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. I helped found the organization 41 years ago now, when I was a law student, and I have been a prosecutor. I have been the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for the National District Attorneys Association, which represents the entire country's state and local level prosecutors all over the country, and I've had a private practice for many years as well.
Thanks, Kurt. Teresa?
Hi, I'm Teresa Lancaster. I'm an attorney survivor featured in The Keepers, and I'm very excited about the new SOL law so that I can help people finally get justice.
Thank you. And Jean?
I'm Jean Hargan and Wayner. I am a survivor advocate, and I do a variety of different things, but my passion is being using my voice in order to help others find theirs.
Perfect. Love that, Jean. Love that. So I guess let's just hop in. I guess the first thing is The Keepers. Let's just touch on that real quick, just to kind of explain who Jean and Teresa are. I guess who better than Kurt, who is we've shared The Keepers story, or at least information on The Keepers before. This is a group of ladies that Kurt kind of came upon and has really been actively trying to help for some time now. So Kurt, why don't you start off with the Keepers, like an introduction to what that is, and then we'll let Teresa and Jean kind of add whatever they would like to add.
Yeah, so that gives me the opportunity to say a few more words about both of these amazing women, because they are absolute heroes in my book and should be in everyone's book. You know, the more grave the crimes that were committed against someone, the more difficult it is for them to come forward and lead the charge to change things. And there couldn't be more grave crimes that occurred than against Teresa and Jean in terms of the clergy abuse scandal from the Maryland Archdiocese. I'm hesitant to tell their story in that regard. I let them tell their own, but they were subject to unspeakable crimes, and yet have the courage to pick themselves up and try to make things better for the rest of us, and including victims, but for all of us really, and seek justice. And it's just an astounding event when you find people with that sort of courage, and these two that's the stuff they're made of. So The Keepers was just an amazing documentary that done on Netflix. It came out in about 2017. It was filmed for years and really focused a great deal of its time on Jean and Teresa and the events that occurred to them, and also specifically around the mystery that still surrounds the murder of a nun by the name of Kathy Sesnick. And it's just a gripping series. It's about I think it's 7 units, 7 1-hour units, roughly 1-hour units. And it's one of those things, if it were a book, you would never put it down until you're finished. And that's sort of the way I treated it. And I've actually watched it several times. I am not likely to watch things like that because of what I do on a daily basis. But it's a gripping series. Anyone who hasn't seen it, it really is something that everyone ought to see. It's one of those situations where they tell a story that if it were a fiction, people would say it's not believable, but it's real life and it's true.
So The Keepers is a Netflix special, so seven units, and focuses on Keokuk High School and some of the things that have been happening there, which clearly, I mean, the topic of our conversation is child sex abuse. So things clearly were going on at that facility. And so this is part of what we feel is, I guess, Kurt has made some big changes, right? Like, I guess the laws that were kind of pushing forward they've been trying to change the laws for some time, right, Kurt? I mean, this is where
Yes.
and
Sure.
It hadn't happened, right? Like, it's just been, how we do with laws, we just keep on pushing and trying to support the ones that we believe in.
Well,
So was there,
Right.
so many things came, I think, as a result. All things that get accomplished are a result of a combination of things. But the Keepers series was seen by millions of people around the entire world, and of course, because it focuses in Maryland, lots of Maryland people have seen the Keepers, and exposed a great deal of problems in the system, both in Maryland and other locations, even around the world. I think that it has done a great deal towards moving the football for victim survivor issues. And one of those issues was a long-standing problem that I know Teresa worked on a regular basis. I think Jean worked on as well, and that was the fact that the statute of limitations to bring a lawsuit against a child abuser essentially created a big problem, because people who are victims of child abuse are not likely to come forward for many years until after the event had occurred, and often they would miss the statute of limitations for bringing any kind of a lawsuit. So Teresa and Jean both worked on that issue over the years. The release of the Keepers helped to bring about that change in Maryland. It also helped, I think it was instrumental in getting the Maryland Attorney General's office to do an investigation into the depth of the clergy abuse scandal within within Baltimore Archdiocese of the Catholic Church, soon to be expanded to other locations.
Yeah, and so we definitely can. Was there anything, Teresa and Jean, that you wanted to add to the Keepers special?
Yeah, I think one of the important things in the Keepers was how Jean bravely came forward in 1992 to report Maskell's abuse. I subsequently joined her and we filed the Doe Roe case against the Archdiocese. And the Archdiocese claimed that they had never heard of Maskell being a pervert until Jean reported it. And basically, we lost that case on the statute of limitations technicality. And they said we had 3 years from the age of majority, which was 18, to sue them. And it has been proven that victims of childhood sexual abuse oftentimes don't come forward until age 52. I was 40 when I came forward in the 90s. And it was a very, very hard blow to both of us when we were just dismissed and made out to be crazy.
Yeah, I can imagine that being really challenging and just emotionally charged at that point.
I think the other part that is more to me upsetting is that criminal pedophile leader of a group was let go. He went on because they didn't have the courage to put this before a jury and to really decide, is this something that can be taken into a courtroom? He was let free to roam and do whatever he wanted until the day he died. And I hold them accountable for everything that he did and his followers did from that point on. I hold the Archdiocese of Baltimore accountable for those victims that were created after that horrible day when they made that final appeals decision.
Mhm. So clearly you said there was like 3 years, it was like within 3 years of the age of 18 at that point. So, I mean, I definitely think that, the Keepers has its place at this point in pushing forward, what's going on now. And although, it is, I mean, unfortunate that, it's taken all this time and, you guys have just been so strong. Hopefully it's shedding light on so many other people that are out there that, are really finding, I think that us, Maryland passing this law is a step in the right direction. And, it's always tough when we at MCVRC, we have people that, like, we have a gentleman that's with us who, he fought for anti-stalking, like it's not going to bring his wife back, but for people in the future and things that are going on now, it's like, you continue to fight. So thank you, ladies, for just being so strong and, really opening yourselves to, this documentary and this movement forward. So thank you for doing that. So at this point, let me see, there's been a change in the child sex abuse laws in Maryland. So before it was, I'm gonna try to remember because I definitely am not like the legal person, which is why I'm perfect to kind of like give this to the audience. Before it was, Teresa was saying it was 3 years past the age of 18, right? So you'd only be like 21 years old at that point. Like if it happened to you when you were 16, you might not have been dealing with the emotions or thoughts or all of the intricacies and feelings that come with being a victim of this kind of crime, where you're in a position where you trust people, you think they have your best interest at heart, you tell someone they don't believe, all the different things, you're just not ready. 3 years, 21 years old, I barely am surprised my mom let me drive a car, right?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that is what we really need to really focus a lot on is I totally repressed it. So it's not just this, that, or the other thing. When I left that school, I left it buried in that school. And so when I did come forward, as Teresa said, to my church in 1992, I was just remembering it for the first time. So the discussion was I truly in my 3-year statute of limitation period? Because I have no memory of anything before when I went and spoke to them. And so in fact, I believe that I was. So there's that dilemma, that question, that, you know, conflict of, can you leave something so severed and then come to it and you start that clock at that point? And their decision was no. And that was what I felt was an affront to survivors and victims of child sexual abuse.
Right,
And
right.
I do as well. You know, you have to keep in mind the reason that Jean repressed it was because of the egregious treatment that she received. You know, it's not as if it was some defect in Jean or the manner in which she dealt with things. It was a natural reaction to being horrifically abused.
Right.
Not to
Which
mention,
part
he was
of what-
using different tools. I'm sorry, Teresa, the hypnosis, drugs, you know, I mean, they were doing things deliberately to affect our memory, our brain, our ability to even, I would hear the click of the door when I left his room and it all went blank. So many of us still have those blank spots, those empty spaces. So they were deliberately doing things also. Didn't mean to interrupt you, Teresa.
No, that's okay. There are many, many hours that are missing for me. I always had understanding or remembered how he abused me, but after I joined the case with Jean, other things started surfacing, and I too was hoping to be within the 3-year limit based on new recovered memory. And back then, they didn't believe that recovered memory was valid, and they had experts coming in saying about false memory syndrome, which has since been debunked. And repressed memory is very, very real. We know that from soldiers coming back and suppressing what happened to them on the battlefield. So that was one hurdle I think we should have overcome. And the other one, of course, was the statute of limitations, which they did increase to age 38, but that it was a standstill for people that had been abused before then.
Right. So it was, go ahead, Kurt.
Both of these women just are amazing in their accomplishments in life. But I want to mention that Teresa is an accomplished attorney and represents crime victims in matters like this, and has done so. I guess you went to law school in the 90s. Is that right, Teresa?
Yes, I became a lawyer when I was just about 50 years old. One reason I went back to law school, went to law school, was after Doe Roe lost. I was just crushed, and I wanted to study the law and find out what in the world went wrong with our case.
So we're
That's so
so proud
interesting.
to represent you both. Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center represents both of these amazing heroes in a case that involves trying to get the report that was conducted by the Maryland Attorney General's office released in full to the public. And that case goes on today. A lot of it is shielded by some confidentiality rules of the court, but I don't think it violates anything to say that number one, we're trying to get it released with essentially with all names intact, and number two, that will likely come to a conclusion within the next several months.
Right. So let me just touch on that. Is Teresa, I definitely think that's super interesting that you went to law school just to understand all the things that are going on, because I think that I am one of the very few non-advocate attorney people at MCVRC, which is why I'm always the one that's wanting to do these, because you know the legalese that's being spoken and the terms and you know all of those things are just so extremely confusing, and then to find yourself thrown into this like court world, it's like you just try to grasp. And I mean, you know, nowadays we have Google, so that's great because you think you're a lawyer sometimes and you're Googling, you also think you're a surgeon and a doctor and whatever it is that you need to be. And so it's interesting that you went like full force and had to, just completely engulf yourself in becoming an attorney. But I mean, I do feel that way. My kids say that I go to work to be a lawyer. I feel that way on some days. And also the report that Kurt's talking about is the Attorney General's report that was like 300 and something pages. And what happened in that report is a lot of the names of the people, the wrongdoers, their names are redacted, so they're still protected, which is not quite exactly, I think, the outcome that people would want to see. If you've been victimized, you want to know that their name is there and that they're being held accountable, and whatever they receive is what happens. So that's the report that Kurt is referring to has a bunch of redactions, including names of individuals that were involved. So the changes to the current law, let's hop onto that. So it was 3 years and then it was 20 years, right? 20 years from the age of 18, which makes you 38. So if you're not ready by the age of 38 and something happened to you while you're a juvenile, then that's just tough and you have no other recourse. That's what it was, right? Am I pinning that right? So something happened to you at 17, 38 comes, your birthday comes, sorry, you've got nothing. Which
Right.
is in essence what these ladies also felt, because at that time it was 3 years, right? So 3 years from 18. So 21, you're not ready to deal with it. That's just tough noogies, move on with your life and just get over it, pretty much.
Right.
And now, we've got a little bit of a different story. So we've got the 20 years and then now there's no, tell me what the term is that I've just dropped out of my head.
No statute of limitations
Statute
in
of
terms
limitations,
of
thank you. I knew I was
in
going
terms
to do
of a
that.
deadline. In
No
terms of a
statute of
deadline to
limitations
file.
on age or what have you.
Yeah, we aren't out of the woods yet
Not
because
out of the woods.
when the cases are filed in October, when the law goes into effect, the church is going to try to again block us by calling the new law unconstitutional. They'll take it to the highest court to appeal. And that is a battle that we have to overcome before we ever see justice.
Right. So let's tack that into the things that we don't know, because that's going to be number 4. So let's go with the positive now. We'll end with the negative. So right now what's passed is no statute of limitations. And we're eagerly awaiting to see what is going to come out of that. And we can chat about that as to what people can kind of expect or watch in the news. So right now what that means as far as no statute of limitations, it's only on the civil side and not on the criminal side. What does that mean? What does civil side versus, if it was a criminal side, what does that look like versus civil?
So in the law,
I ask this every single time.
in the law, there are statutes of limitations for both criminal and civil matters. Basically, a simple way of thinking of a statute of limitations is that it's too late to do something about an event. And there are, in the criminal world, statute of limitations on crimes, on prosecuting crimes, but they're not related to the concept of bringing a lawsuit against somebody. That would be in the civil arena. And the statute of limitations in Maryland is fairly, it's a fairly good situation. Anything that's a felony, roughly speaking, anything that's a felony in Maryland, there is no statute of limitations. It can be prosecuted forever. When you get to lesser offenses that are called misdemeanors, there are different statutes of limitations. What changed and what these ladies worked on changing was the civil statute of limitations that allows an individual to sue someone involved in sex abuse against a person who was a child at the time that it occurred. And, that has changed. I really want to say to some, maybe this is important to say to somebody who's 37 years old, if it happened to you, don't wait. Get to an attorney and get something filed right away, because there is some differences there are some differences in your rights if you file before the age of 38, as opposed to filing after that. And especially with what Teresa just said about this new law, this new abolition of the deadline is up for scrutiny within the courts to see whether it's going to be considered constitutional. So if something happened to you and you're struggling with the concept of coming forward to make a civil suit against someone who has abused you or an organization that did not protect you from abuse, you need to worry about it now, not later. And to the best of your ability, if you're able, talk to a lawyer right away.
Can I
And-
say something too, in line with that? Whoever is listening or whoever does know someone, it would be very different today than when Teresa and I did. They should never have had us in a room with a line of lawyers without a trauma expert with us. They should never have treated us as if we were just the regular everyday person. I believe that you will have the support in a way that was much different. And that's what you look for. If you do go to a lawyer, be sure that they understand the trauma, because that part is essential. And if they don't, find another one, because you need to have that kind of support, especially if you go earlier than maybe you had thought you could. So just keep that in mind. It'll be different. Trauma specialist, they understand things now in a much different way. And I encourage you to ask about that when you see a lawyer, if you see a lawyer.
Mhm. Thank you for that, Jean. And, I recently had a meeting with one of our local organizations that does work with sex abuse and domestic violence. And, when we were sitting at the table, I said, we at MCVRC, if you're going to another organization because you're comfortable with speaking to a different person or, whatever, like, it doesn't matter which venue you get help, as long as you can traverse yourself into a way to get the help that you need once you've been the victim of a crime. And, it's unfortunate that we have to really push people to do it, and deal with their feelings. But I think it's important for them to know that, that it's still different and your rights look different. So, anytime waiting is, it hurts. It hurts in the long run, and it hurts when it comes to justice. So unfortunately, I'm glad that you guys threw it out there, because it's important for people to know that it looks different. So at this point, you can do the civil, but not the criminal. And so I have the question mark of proof on there, because proof looks different, right? When it's something that it's fresh.
The standard with the criminal is higher. You have to reach, but with the civil court, you still have to prove your case in court. It's not a free ride, but it's a lesser degree, reasonable doubt. I think that's what it is.
So what does that look like? What should people be cognizant of in trying to create a case, or maybe act on something that's older? Like, what does that look like for them?
Well, interestingly enough, in the process of representing these two and trying to, one of the things we're trying to do is not just get this report released, but get people who are accused in the report prosecuted. And so we've been looking at the standards that are involved in all of that, and discussions with people who are expert prosecutors, essentially. And the answer is that in almost all rape or sex abuse cases, even, but especially with youth victims, it's it's almost always a problem of he said, she said. And the reason that that is so is because the perpetrators, of course, take great pains to make sure that what they do in secret, and that they cover it up. So they're always difficult cases, and they are many times based upon the credibility of the survivor, the victim survivor. But that should not be a deterrent to people, because especially in situations like this, what you find is that when one person comes forward and points a finger at someone, you may have 5 other people come forward and point a finger as well. Now you've got a different story. It's no longer a he said, she said. It's a he said versus 5 she saids, and that dramatically changes the equation. So and maybe this is a good time to say what Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center does. If you are a victim and you need any sort of help or services, and particularly in the legal arena having to do with the criminal side of things, that's what we do. And we do it for free for anyone who needs it. Come forward and we will help you. If you need to get to the civil side and you want to file a suit against someone, you come forward, we'll help you find someone. We refer cases to people. Teresa is one of the people that we refer people to. And we're happy to help you with any of that. But when you, we often deal with and work with the attorneys on the civil side who will represent you in bringing a civil suit against the people who are responsible for your abuse.
Okay, so that's the heavy parts, right? I mean, such a heavy topic. So in my head, I am, of course, like rolling all these things around, and we can help you find resources. Other organizations can help you find resources. We do provide the criminal aspect. So I think of kids, and I think of young children, and I think about like my own kids. I have boys. I have a stepdaughter and I have boys, but I mean that doesn't mean anything, right? Like I think it was very telling with the Archdiocese case that there was a whole separate entity that was all the boys on one, at one school, and all these girls. So it doesn't. I think that we tend to stereotype that it's happening to only females, but that's not always the case. And as a parent, it's like, you hope that your kids will come to you if they need something or something happened. I think that there's a lot to what you said, Kurt, as far as like, children coming forward, or, trying to find a safe adult, or telling a story, and who's going to listen and who believes them, and what's repressed and what's not. And it's just so many question marks. So I guess what I'm going to throw out there is, if you believe something has happened to your child, or can children come out directly? Like, how does that look? Like, can juveniles come forward on their own?
Sure they can.
Can they get
there
rights at a 14-year-old? Maybe they don't want to go to mom and dad.
Yes.
They think mom and dad's going to beat their butt and ground them.
There are other difficulties involved, of course, but absolutely they can.
I mean, I feel like social media kind of has made children, young people, like all accessible to all the information in the world. So they fall upon this video. They're like, oh my gosh, this happened to me with coach so-and-so, or teacher whoever it is that I was helping grade papers with. I mean, Lord knows you don't know what the story is, that they could reach out to us on their own.
Sure they could. It would, and they could do so in complete privacy as well. if there is a problem, discussing it with your parents or counselors at school or the Child Protective Services, anything of that nature. Discussing it with us is done in complete privacy and does not have to be reported to anyone in the family. In our organization, because of the nature of our organization as being an entity that represents victims in court, being their attorney, essentially having an attorney-client relationship, we are not mandatory reporters, so that we are not in a situation where we actually absolutely have to report child sex abuse to the authorities as well. So if there's some 14-year-old out there who doesn't want any of this talked about to anyone, but wants to talk to us, then that's a completely acceptable scenario, and we would try to help them.
I kind of feel also that it goes before that. Kathy Sesnick was observing. She watched, she asked little questions. She took the time to feel out what her intuition, her suspicions were. And she tried to do something. Now, what I feel is that we need to be talking to each other as adults. I think the conversation has to be that we talk about these hard, difficult things. I did a talk for a seminary. It was for Episcopal priest, and it was their last class. And what I told them was, find partners, people who you can talk to, other teachers, other clergy, other adults, so that if you ever suspect something, you talk with them. You need people to have your back, because we came up against power, and power will knock this down. So until you feel that you have the support to really ask the question, to really hear the response, I think you feel very alone and threatened by power just by the feel of it. If you create that community, the teeny little group, it can be sisters, and once a month you just plug in because you have nieces and nephews. It might be any way you would look at it. I think it starts there. I think that Teresa and I have found this is a very difficult subject. People would prefer it went back to sleep, that we weren't dealing with it, that we just pretended it all got taken care of. And it hasn't. It will be around probably the rest of eternity. But I think it starts with us talking to each other, communicating our own uncomfortableness, talking about our own questions about things that happen to us, not being afraid to trust someone else to hear it from your daughter, so that, you can say to your kids, if you have something you need to talk about, you don't have to talk to me. Talk to who you trust, but you need to start that conversation as adults who are really uncomfortable talking about this terrible thing. And I think that's the first step. You need to have your own little community, so you don't put yourself out there, as I did, and put your head on a block and think there's the support, and it's not.
Yeah, I
That's a good
recently
point.
talked to some students at UMBC. It was a psychology class, and I basically told them what Jean's saying here. And after I spoke with them, I had many of them come up to me and tell me, yeah, they were a victim, they were abused, and they were going to go and talk to people, not necessarily their parents, but other adults in places like RAINN or SNAP. It's important.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely, Jean, thank you for that, because I actually was going to tap into teachers, thinking that something's going on. And it doesn't even have to be in-house. I mean, sometimes I taught I was a long-term sub for a little while, and I always had this open door policy for students, whether they be my students in my class or students that just knew me because my kids went to the same school or what have you, that I've always wanted to be like a safe person for whoever needed a safe person, whether it be a hot meal or an ear to listen or, you know, a mom hug or whatever. Like I've always just really kind of strived to be that. But I think that finding the strength, you know, you guys again are amazing for doing, you know, what you did, but you know, it's tough for, I think, everyone to stand against the grain and I would hope that most people want to do the right thing, but you don't know what that looks like sometimes, and you don't know what steps to take. And so again, our lines are open for those that need resources. Our advocates that answer our phone have resources all over the state of Maryland, and sometimes we dip into other places too, because we just never know when people need help. So we just do the best that we can to help as many as we can. So thanks for bringing that up. I think that's a great point. And you know, we really have to normalize talking about some of the taboo subjects. I think that by not talking about it, we're leaving people out in the lurch and making them feel alone when that's never, I mean, it's never my intention to do that. But you know, the hard topics are the hard topics, and people try to skirt them and talk about the weather instead. So, you know, unfortunately, that's kind of the life that we live in. But I think that most people are open and try to be supportive, and you know, hopefully you can find a lot of allies, you know, within your own lives if you need it. Okay, so let's talk about what Teresa was bringing up. What does tomorrow look like? What are we still keeping our eye on? What does it look like? What are all the things? Because one of the things that came up in our staff meeting the other day was like, what if, and it was just like our staff meetings always turn legal. So it's always like, I always have to take notes because I just, you know, I'm not that attorney. I just play one on TV. And it was like, what if a little kid touched another little kid at a school? And, you know, 40 years later, the little girl remembers that she was touched by this little kid, and the little boy's probably like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like I was just, you know, 6 or whatever. So we don't know what some of these things are going to look like, right? Like we don't know what court's going to look like because it hasn't happened yet. The bill the legislation just recently passed. So there's still a whole lot of question marks as to what court's going to look like, what proof's going to look like, what you're going to need to kind of put together. I mean, who, what, where, when, why. I mean, we just don't know some things. But Teresa alluded to some of the things that we are expecting down the road. So let's just open that up. We are thinking that there's going to be some movements, right? Go ahead, Teresa. We'll open up this conversation and see how this goes. It's like a can of worms. It's like you're waiting for it to just like pop open, right?
Yeah, one of the frustrating things for me, and I'm sure Jean as well, is that the church, even though we successfully exposed some of the enablers in that Attorney General report, the church is denying that and basically allowing them to stay in their positions in the church. I think that until they are completely accountable and transparent, you know, we will have a lot of hurdles to overcome. And the fact that the church is dumping a lot of money into the constitutional battle is a sign that they're not ready to come clean. And these things are still happening. So we have that hurdle to get through, you know, with the constitutional issue.
So back to the report, and let me just try to see if I remember this or if this is right. The report was redacted. Names were redacted. The names that were released are perpetrators. Is that the right word? Perpetrators? Maybe. Okay.
Accused.
I'm getting head nods. The ones that were not redacted, the names that were released are the ones that have already passed away.
Right, the dead abusers.
The ones that remain redacted are the ones that are still alive, right?
Yes, and fortunately, the Sun paper reporters have done investigations and uncovered the names, and we see the names are out there, and that's where the church says, well, you know, it wasn't that bad.
Right. So just for the people that are watching at home, so the names that stayed redacted are the people that are still alive, but there was a reporter that kind of did this, like based on the information that was provided in the report, we can put, it's like a game of Clue, right? Like who has the wrench in the kitchen? By following the storyline in the report, they solved who the actual people's names were that were redacted. And so that was kind of leaked out. And they're still just kind of like skipping along, living their lives.
We want indictments against the living abusers, right, Kurt? That's something that we would like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's embarrassing to me that that there seems to be an effort to pass by the whole concept of making these people criminally accountable for what they did. It's embarrassing. It's sad, and it's a disgrace. And I think everyone who has been a prosecutor, including me, understands that there are some reasons why it's difficult to prosecute 50-year-old cases, 40-year-old cases. And it's expensive to do. And there are present cases that need to be prosecuted. And there's limited resources within prosecutors' offices. But when you look at the scope and the scale and the grievousness of these offenses that were committed, and the evil that was done by evil people who are still living and breathing, and the entire concept of letting them get away without even attempting to hold them accountable is disgraceful. And that's where we are today. I am hopeful that at some point that concept is going to resonate with some people who have the ability to take these cases up and prosecute them. I am certainly doing my very best. Our organization is doing our very best to get people within those prosecutorial positions to listen to what we have to say and see that what they're doing needs to change for the cause of justice.
And so let me just break this down a little bit more for those at home. So here's this big, huge report that was done by the Attorney General's office. And you guys correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just, listen, I'll keep on touting that I'm not an attorney and I'm not good at this stuff, but I'm gonna break it down. All right. So there's this big, huge report about all of these cases that have been covered up by the Archdiocese of Baltimore. And then they do this big, long report. It's like 360 pages long.
456 pages.
456 pages long report that has all these marked through. So they're like, we did this big, huge report. We release it to the public with like, bloop, 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 the blah, 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 beep, 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 beep. I mean, you can barely read it, right? Because it's got all these redactions in it. And then when it comes down to it, the ones that are alive, they're like, oh yeah, you can't know their names. Like, we're going to let these names out. So it's almost like almost a taste of justice, almost like just like pulling the carrot away. It's like, here's the carrot and it's moving. The report took years and years to get out, right? Kurt, it was like how many years they've been waiting for?
4 years.
4 years. They're waiting for this report. It has all these redactions. Then they finally go back in, they take out the redactions of the people that have already passed. And then they're like, okay, here you go. Somebody's doing this. I mean, it's just this whole long, never ending thing. And at the end of the day, it's just a report, right?
Well,
Like that's how I feel like it is for.
I have to interject. We
Sure.
got the report the way it is because I believe because of Kurt and the group. They were going to keep on this conversation about who gets redacted and who doesn't. And the suggestion was you got to get the report out to the people. So there were going to be, tell me if I'm wrong, Kurt, there were going to be a lot of redactions then. And then with the understanding it was going back into the court in order to debate and discuss whose names were staying redacted and whose were to be put back in. So I do need to give credit because we wouldn't have gotten it when we finally did. Am I correct in what I'm saying, Kurt?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah,
I
the
that was
remember
very
Kurt,
important.
I
That
remember
was very
Kurt
important
fighting.
to me.
I do remember Kurt fighting for that, and thank you for giving him the credit. I think that and he's definitely a passionate man, and he was staying on the button for that. Believe me, we heard a lot about it in staff meetings, and that's the only reason why I feel like I'm a lawyer. But in the long, so there's this report, and there are some names that are, not redacted, which is great. And then, it's still kind of on the button, like it's still
Right.
current,
being
still current. We're
desired.
still pushing. But as far as you ladies and many, many others that have been victimized by the people that are in this report, at the end of the day, it's a report that still has redactions. We're still fighting. We're still working, right, Kurt, for in court about this. But
We're
in the
working-
meantime, it has pushed forward this legislation. So it's almost like, we're still doing that. This is moving forward. Are there other states that have no statute of limitations on child sex
Yes.
abuse cases? There are
Yes.
other ones.
We are-
Okay.
We are not the first state who has done away with the statute of limitations on these suits. And other states are considering it, behind us. So, it's a matter of both at this point, that it is entirely possible that other states will change as a result of what we've done and other states before us have done. And other states did it before we did, yes.
Thank you for that. It was a question that I had. I was like, I wonder where we were kind of sitting with that. So that's great news. I think that's great news. And hopefully, it becomes a trend. I'm always super proud of our state in doing what it's doing. I mean, I think that, it's those taboo subjects that are being put on the table, and they're being discussed. And hopefully, this video will help people out there to at least know that there's no statute of limitations, where you can go to get help, what you can do. Check out this special, the Netflix special. We're looking, I guess, forward to updates, and kind of if you see all of the things that are going on with the Archdiocese. I know that this is not the only Archdiocese that has been in these types of troubles. So if you hear of, like Teresa said, there's going to be a big, what do you call it again? When they try to change the constitutionality of,
Yeah.
tell me again. Question the
The
constitutionality of,
constitutional issue, they want to say that the statute of limitations being done away with, it was unconstitutional. I was just up in Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago. Their battle is to get a 2-year open window to let the older cases, the older survivors come forward. And we were rallying behind them, and they do not have even the 2-year open window. What we did in Maryland is very significant, because we tried for a 2-year window for a number of years. And then this year we won no window, anytime we can come forward. But we have that constitutional hurdle looking at us.
so, I mean, all that we can do right now is know that that's what's passed, and we're kind of, we'll keep people abreast of if something comes down the pipe. I know Kurt will have his finger on that button. And I'm sure it's not the last that we will see of you ladies, and, look forward to continuing whatever we need to do for those things. But for now, that has passed. And if people want to start kind of mentally preparing for their own personal next steps, now is the time for you to face those things. And if we can assist people in finding the resources that they need, we are here. We service crime victims throughout the state of Maryland. So we have people in all of the counties, kind of just ready, and our phone lines are open, emails.
I should say too, that if you want to sue the Archdiocese, you don't have to come out with your name. We can file for you under Jane Doe, John Doe. You do not have to release your name if you don't feel comfortable doing that.
Thank you for that as well.
Jean,
And this
you-
is
you
for
had some-
particularly the
Yeah.
Baltimore Archdiocese. is their cases, particularly the Baltimore Archdiocese.
Right. And there's still 2 dioceses that have not been added to that list. Those survivors, I mean, that are coming forward there. Keep that in mind, everyone. You know, this is not the Maryland report. This is the Baltimore
And-
report.
Right.
And that
And we
will
don't-
be opening everything up again with more numbers, we have no idea who abused what you see are in those moved to those other dioceses. So it can be a lot of similar information.
If you're a victim survivor in Rhode Island or Arizona or Canada or Mexico, we don't care. Contact us. We'll try to help find you help. So don't worry about where it occurred to you, and don't worry about the details. We'll try to get you assistance. Our assistance primarily focuses on Maryland. But one of the other things I wanted to say before we let these 2 amazing people go is that they've both written books that are just gripping, and they're hard to read. I think they know they're hard to read because no one wants to see the agony that has been imposed upon you, but it's so important. I think that one of the reasons that as Americans, generally speaking, are out of touch with crime victims and their rights is because they need to walk a mile in their moccasins. And I think that's right. I hadn't thought of the fact that Teresa's book is called Safe in Socks. And it's absolutely gripping. Jean's is called Walking with Alethea. And they are both available on Amazon, I believe. Is that right, ladies?
Yes, I want to throw in for those who have not come forward, who have not spoken to anyone, there's a lot of therapy. There's varieties of places you can find your way to. My book talks about healing, and it talks about those things that I was able to do. Because when you're remembering these things, you can feel crazy. You can feel as if no one will believe a word you say. Please, no, that is, if you find those to talk to, you'll be surprised how many people do understand. So my book is more, it does speak of what happened to me. I don't think you can understand the crime of this, as I know Teresa feels the same, unless we do talk about some of the ugly stuff. But it is also about how I thought it was crazy. I thought I was nuts. I couldn't believe anyone would ever want to hear my way out. And because it is different, but it's my way. We each have our own way. So I do think Teresa and my book are things that will help just to be another voice that you hear while you're finding your voice.
And the end result, you know, somewhat along the lines of Shakespeare saying all's well and ends well. Both of those books, despite the fact that they are gripping and agonizing at points to read, are ultimate triumphs, because we know that the outcome of both of their lives has been major successes in being wonderful people who help others.
Clearly. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We are right out of time now. If you're watching from home and this is a recording, please feel free to comment. We'll see those on the back end and be able to respond. If you are watching at home and need resources and don't want to comment, please send us a message, send us an email, get on our website, get an inquiry in, whether you're in the state of Maryland, whether you're out of the state, whether you're in the, we will do all that we can to help you find resources that you need. If we can help you, then we will. Absolutely. I think there's a wealth of knowledge out there. Thank you, ladies, for being so strong and being a voice for those who may not have found their voices yet. And I'm super proud of Maryland. For those of you guys that need help with the court system here, again, Maryland Crime Victims, we provide free resources to any person who's been a victim of crime in the state of Maryland for free, regardless of income. If you need help finding your voice, you've found the right place. So thank you for joining us. Please make sure that you are sharing this video. You never know who you're going to help by sharing an informational video. You just never know, because maybe they haven't told you. You don't know the demons that people battle. So please do that. This video will also be on YouTube for future use. So again, thank you, Teresa and Jean, for joining Kurt and I. Thank you guys for breaking down all of the information, and keep an eye on, what is headed down the pike as far as, keeping these types of actions moving for victims to ensure that they have time to heal and come forward when they're ready. So thank you again.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
ladies.
Thank you.